Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Canadian Professional Sales Association. My name is Kate, and I'll be your moderator. Please note that you've been placed on mute for the duration of this webinar. You may participate throughout the webinar and ask questions during the Q&A session at the end using the Ask Question function in your GoToWebinar dashboard. Hosting today's webinar is Cindy Stradling. Sales agent, facilitator, and coach, Cindy brings over 25 years of practical hands-on business experience to her work. She has worked across various sectors, including production, logistics, materials management, retail, customer service, and sales. She has achieved her CSP designation through the CPSA and is a certified coach. Cindy works with entrepreneurs, individuals, and corporations such as Canon Canada, 3M Canada, and BMO. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Cindy to get started.
Great, thank you. So excited to be here, Kate. I'm going to have to update your bio. I'm actually a CSL now. I got my designation earlier this year, so I'm really proud of that. So, one of the things that we want to be able to make sure for anybody who attends our webinars is to make sure that there is participation and interaction. So, if you have questions, put them into the Q&A area. As Kate said, we're going to do a poll later. I do my best to finish a little bit earlier than 1 o'clock so that we do have some time for questions. So I've been plus 25 years in sales. I've started my own company in 2004. I've been in sales. I sell for my own company and still do it to this day. I had my CSP in 2002 and very proudly got my CSL late 2019. I am also a certified coach through Erickson College, and I do a lot of sales coaching. And I also have my adult ed certification through Seneca College. So I'm super excited to be here and hope that if you've got questions, you're going to participate, and we'll do our best to answer them. So the understanding for today's outcome is to understand how to focus on solving problems, understand clients' needs, and ultimately deliver business value to clients by being consultative. I think it's really important to note that all of you will get credit for your CSP or your CSA. You get credit hours for today's session if you're working towards any of your designations. And today is really all about being consultative, because when we think back to the old days, it was actually more sales focused on the person's sales results than it ever was the client. So it's really important that we spend the time to understand our clients' needs. And back in the old days, the snake oil salesman, and it was always about trying to sell something. It was never ever about trying to uncover needs. That no longer works in any environment. And I've always, fortunately, my whole life I've spent in sales. I've always been in the role where I needed to actually understand the client's needs before I could ever possibly provide them with any kind of a solution. And it's a real value-based approach. So you want to be able to deliver value for your company. And by that, I mean you put your own objectives in the background and you really focus for your clients on the return on investment. And you're really looking to close the gap between where the client is currently and where the future state is. And we'll look at a business case for that, which is absolutely, I use it all the time in my own business. And really, you need to be able to always be constantly refining your unique value proposition so that it's specific to you, your organization, and that, the solutions that you're providing are unique. For all of you, this is a quick reminder of the 8-step consultative sales process. So if you look at pre-call planning was the first, pre-call planning, and then the first is building rapport, and then establishing context, gaining agreement to participate. And today, what we're really focusing on is the consultative investigation. Of course, then you have your summary and prioritizing, looking at the different options, quantifying benefits and ROI, and then, of course, getting your secure go-ahead commitment and then your call documentation. But for the purposes of today, we're going to focus only on step number 4, which requires us to ask questions in all areas. And we're going to use tools like the client objectives map, the key business results, the measures, and the needs and objectives. So it's really important that we take a deeper dive into this particular step. And it's all about asking. Don't tell, investigate, don't sell. And we must really work at breaking the fundamental paradigm, that it's always, about the salesperson. We got to break the paradigm and go back that it's customer centric. And consultative selling forces us to forget the key assumption and instead adopt a more inquisitive approach. And we're going to look at different questions and things like that. And a really great analogy for this is if you were going to your doctor. Oh, I'm going to go back for 1 second. If you went to your doctor as an example, you'd go in, you'd go to the receptionist, you'd check in, you'd give them your name, they'd pull up your record, and then they would show you when it came your turn to go into the examination room. The doctor would come in, he would ask you some questions, how you feeling, maybe take a deeper dive, explain a little bit more about that, how often does that happen? Is there anything that you're particularly doing that causes that discomfort or things along those lines? And then once a doctor gets a lot of information, as much as he feels that he needs or she needs, they will assimilate it, they'll apply their knowledge, and through deductive reasoning, will make a recommendation, whether it's a treatment or it's another test or whatever it is. They will get back with their diagnosis. And then you'll leave and then you'll talk to the nurse or the receptionist and they'll set up your next appointment. And so if you think of it that way, it's very, very much like the same thing you would do in a sales call as far as the investigation goes. I mean, can you imagine going into the doctor and he doesn't ask you any questions and then just gives you a pill and says, here, this should fix all your ailments. I mean, that's ludicrous. But in some ways, that's what some sales models, sales folks did in the past. I don't think they do them much anymore. And so I've got a question. You can put these in the answer to this in the Q&A feature on the webinar dashboard. What makes consultative selling so effective? And I'll wait for a moment, and then Kate can let me know what folks have answered.
And so one person wrote in and said, talking with a customer about tier business. And another wrote in and said, it is a partnership process.
For sure. And how you get there is really around asking the questions to further understand your needs. And I really like with your customer and partners, that's so true. That's true consultative selling, is that if you think about being with and a partner with your customers as opposed to trying to sell them something. And consultative investigation gives the salesperson an opportunity to demonstrate social evidence by talking about references and testimonials and things like that. And asking the questions allows you to gather the data needed to build the ideal solution. Until you actually understand, it's really not possible to give them the proper response or the proper solution. And you want to make sure that it would be the ideal solution that would trigger the customer to take action. And so here's the question for everybody. What is some of the topics that must be explored to truly understand the customer's business and deliver genuine consultative value? Again,
So while we wait for those answers to come in, we actually had a few people participate on that last question and they had great answers. So I thought I'd share.
Oh yeah, for sure. Sorry.
No, that's great. So we had tailored solutions. One person wrote in and said, I have found consultative selling puts me on the same team as the customer, as opposed to being on the opposite side of the table. We had someone write in, understanding the needs that they might have, making it more personal, and offering a real solution.
Nice, very nice. They're all excellent. Tailored solutions. I like that. And I like the same team. That goes right back to with and partner.
And
Okay,
so for some upcoming topics, should I share those now?
absolutely.
Awesome. So we had present state and desired future state.
Hmm.
And we had Laura wrote in and said hurdles, priorities, goals, budget, and past experience.
Yep. Anyone else?
Current challenges came in.
Yep. Current situation. Yep. Desired future situation would be another.
Uh, demographics.
Hmm.
And what they like so far with the current sales rep and what they aren't liking. It's a great
Yeah,
suggestion.
that's a great question.
Have you pivoted your business since the pandemic started?
Hmm.
And decision makers. Those are all great.
Yep, the buying decision making process is huge. You want to be able to get that information up front. Time and budget considerations is another. You want to make sure that you're understanding their sense of priority. Is this something they're going to be doing fairly soon, or is it something that's a little bit further out on the calendar? And, a really great one too is customer success criteria and expectations. And that's, really digging down and finding out, especially when whoever was suggested, what you like about your current supplier and what don't you like about your current supplier. Really, at that stage, you could actually find out what the customer success criteria is and what are their expectations of a vendor or a supplier. And you setting that up front, you can tell if you're aligned immediately to go forward. Was there any more, Kate?
That's all for now.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to move across. Next slide is going to be talking about exactly what we just talked about, your investigation topic. So you want to make sure um, that to be truly consultative, you need to be a resource for your clients. You must seek to understand their business as well as they do, and in some cases, if possible, even better, because sometimes people, if they're working in the same environment all the time, there might be some areas that they don't see, some blind spots. So if you do your homework right, you might be able to expose those types of things to the client that they may not even be able to see. And you can provide them with totally the best advice possible, and you want to be able to investigate all aspects of the client's business, just not things pertaining to your own products or service. Like to be a full service, if you go back to with the partner, with your client, there may be other areas where you can help that doesn't actually pertain to your own business, but that can build a lot of goodwill. So you need to, the really important parts of the step 4 is you need to understand how the customer's business operates. You need to know what's important to the customer's organization. What are their core business goals and issues? What are they dealing with on a regular basis? And a prioritization of those needs. Very, very important. Return on investment and potential business impact. One of the things is talking about, once you've identified there's an issue, and if you're talking about potential impact, not only if they do it, but what if they don't do it? If they don't make a decision to move forward now, what is the potential impact of that? Whatever the keys are to mobilizing movement, creating a sense of urgency, and identifying the ROI is very, very important, because the most important you want to be able to do is make it happen. Keep it moving forward. It's very important to qualify the criteria that are not precise by asking the clarifying questions. And if you go to the dashboard on the CPSA website, there is the consultative investigation template that you have there. And you might have to modify a little bit depending on your industry, but these are really great questions that you should be asking especially at the very beginning and at the beginning of a need. I think they're absolutely wonderful questions, and we're going to go into more questions as we move forward. But that's there for you as a resource. You can just download it, and if you have to modify something a little bit here and there. But the key with that, as with any tool, is to actually make sure that you maybe remind you, or you think about asking questions that you wouldn't have normally. If you've got a model that you can use and it's in a way to serve as a reminder so you don't forget, because we all have a lot of things on our mind and you might not, but having a tool like this readily available to you can help you make sure you don't miss anything. And then we're going to look at the client's objective map. And, it's really important that your question effort must cover the details behind these three elements. The problem is that many salespeople jump right to the end one, which is their needs and objectives, instead of actually spending the time up front and fully understanding. So it's really important to know what business measures or results do your clients target. So is it shareholder value? Is it sales? Is it revenue? Are they looking for more profit? Are they looking at increased output? Even improved quality, cost savings, time savings, customer satisfaction, could be reduced inventory, reduced turnover. And so each one of these are really, really important to move from the left. Successful salespeople will move from the left to the right. They don't jump right to the needs assessment. And I know that when I first started in sales, when I did my very first course, this was one of the things that they talked about then. It was drilled into me right from the beginning, was to really understand the needs. And I remember when I hired salespeople, I'd go on a sales call with them, and they would jump right to the need. It was like they thought they knew what the person, and I can't even tell you the number of sales calls that we had to go back and do a second call to really get an understanding. So as a professional, knowing this up front, you're going to want to be able to make sure that you understand as many of these that are applicable, and then understanding what the current business issues. I think someone mentioned earlier, pivoted as a result of the pandemic. That's a great question nowadays. What are some of the issues you're dealing with? Is there poor performance? Maybe people working from home, they're not able to meet the demands that they could when they were in the office. That seems to be something. Are there emerging markets? Kate and I were talking before we started, there's going to be all kinds of new things happening as a result of the pandemic and the new normal, as they call it. Increased competitive threat. Is there anything like that? There could be pressure from the senior management or shareholders. You need to know that going forward. And then you can get into, there could be a number of different things but then you can move into the needs and objectives. So what are the tangible needs, objectives, and triggers that you can address? So maybe it's new systems. Maybe it's new products. Maybe it's improved productivity. There could be new processes and enhanced quality. All of these are really important. And if you use this as a tool, just as an outline, and couple that with some of the questions that we're going to look at later, you will be able to see firsthand. You're going to have everything in one spot. You're not going to have to miss any spots. You're not going to rely on your memory. I'm all about having structures and resources, readily available, so that people will be able to follow through and not miss any important points when you're going on a sales. So we're going to do a really quick poll now. The client's objectives map works best when it is explored first in the investigation. So the poll is now open.
We'll just give people a few minutes to vote here.
Yep.
All right, let's share these responses. Can you see those answers?
No.
No problem. I can talk them through. So we had 16% say business issues, 42% say key business results and measures, and 42% also said needs and objectives.
So the correct one is the 36%.
Business issues.
So it's no, key business
Oh,
results and measures. Sorry, I must have had that
42%. There we go.
42%. Okay, I'm just writing it down now. All right. Okay. So good job. Good job. Okay, we're going to move along now. We're going to talk about questions. I think, that's what the core foundation of consultative sellings is questions. And there's different kinds of questions that you would use in different situations. So, up until this point, we've really talked about what we want to uncover through a consultative investigation, but now we really must consider how we're going to do it. And when it comes to consultative investigation, we have several tools to us. And generally speaking, these tools are simply different types of questions. And if you can ask the right questions, you can find out the results, or you can find out exactly what you need to know to be able to provide a solution. So the first one is open probes. So that's an open-ended question that, as an example, you could say, what criteria do you use to select a supplier? So that's left wide open. They can't answer that with a yes or no, whereas a closed probe means a yes or no. And there's times when you would use both. Do you currently buy from more than one supplier would be a yes or a no answer. And that might be something that you would do. So deliberately making sure that you have the right questions up front can make a big difference. There's one called coattailing, and this is what you say. As an example, it said, you said pricing was critical. So I'd like to understand more in order to help. What has been your specific pricing history on this product over the past 2 years? So you're coattailing and you're actually adding, you're saying what you want to understand, and then you're adding a question on the end of it. And then there's what they call high gain questions. And so a good example of that is, what are your impressions of our reputation as a supplier in the marketplace relative to the others you have used? Very important question. So you want to know what how do they perceive you? What's your reputation like? And then there's what they call leading questions. You have to be careful with leading questions, because it's the example we have is, you said pricing was important. How important is quality? So it's not to negate in this particular example that quality is not important, but it is a way to be able to help you with the prioritizing. And then grand tour questions, which is, so what is the biggest things keeping you awake at night these days about your operation? So it's probably the pandemic. If you were to ask somebody these days, how they're going to pivot, what are they going to do? And so the universal questions are, there's 6 universal questions that we can use all the time. And so you need to know who. So it's who, what, where, when, why, how, and how much. And so the who is, who are your customers? So understanding how they service their customers and who their customers are is really vital to show how you can help them do a better job of servicing their customers. What are your customers' goals and problems? So these are, again, it's a great universal question. Where do things happen within the company? So this could be, where are the decisions made? If you're looking at a, new equipment or new, where is it, which department is it? Where exactly is this going to be used? Could be one of the questions. And when do you need to take action? Again, this can help you with your priorities and understand, your sense of timing for that. And then why must they address this problem? And this is, what is the cost of doing it and versus not costing it? And so this is where you can really drill down and find out why it's important for them to address the problem. And then how do they plan to achieve their goals and solve their problems? So, maybe they've already got some things in place. Maybe they've tried some things that didn't work, and you could dig down and find that out. And then how much of your type of product or service do they use today? And this is another great question. So this could be one of your, upsell type of things that you could add on. I remember, I guess it was about 5 or 6 years ago, I did sales training for a company that sold, they're like O-rings. They were O-rings and they were manufacturing. And it was funny because they also had some screws and a few odd other things. But anybody that had ever used the O-ring would also use a couple of other items that they had, but nobody ever asked them for that. And so we just talked about how they could actually bring it into the conversation, so that typically when, customers buy this particular product, they also buy this. And so you could add on it. And the idea is it also makes it easier for a customer. They don't have to issue two POs. They can deal with one supplier. So I think it's really important to how much they use and for their organization, and if there's any other things within your organization or services. It might not necessarily be products, but it could be services. Good information to know. So we're going to look now at the 5 why. This is an amazing process. You can use it to really truly understand, because this will get you down deeper than maybe that any of the other questions might not take you down. And professionals are really skilled at digging down. So it's what they call the 5 why model. And you ask your customer 5 times when a customer expresses a problem. And I've got an example that really illustrates this. It's pretty fantastic, actually. And so the question is, why is the electricity out? A fuse blew because of an overload. Why was there an overload? The sub pump was drawing more electricity than usual. Why was the sub pump drawing more electricity than usual? Something is jammed in the impeller. Why is something jammed in the impeller? Because the pit is full of loose material. Why is the pit full of loose material? Because it doesn't contain a proper crock. So if you think about this, if you look at the beginning, if they only changed the fuse, they would not have gotten to what the real problem was, which was the pit full of loose material. So going down 5 whys is an absolute fantastic way to dig down and find out. And so many times people will make a quick judgment or make a quick suggestion without really fully understanding what the impact of whatever whatever the issue is. So really, I've used this in my own personal life as well, and trying to figure things out. And it's been a really valuable tool for me over the years. So I really recommend you to start to incorporate the 5 whys into your sales calls and to really dig down. It also sends another message to the client that you're really interested, that you truly want to understand at a very deep level why it's important. What is really going on, rather than, as I said earlier, jumping right over to, offering a solution. Now we're going to go into listening, and actually we're moving along really quickly. So I'm going to stop for 1 minute and see if there are any questions at this point before we move into the listening module, because I'm way ahead of time, so I'm probably talking too fast.
Everything's been great so far. I'll just give it 1 more minute and see if any questions or comments come in. So Laura wrote in and said, any ideas on how to prevent the 5 whys from seeming obnoxious?
That's actually a great question. And you could actually reframe some of them. So if we go back to this example, so why did the electricity go out? A fuse blew because of an overload. You could say something like, is there, you could use, let me think off the top of my head. So is it usual for you to have an overload, right? Or do you know why? I'm trying to think of how you would word it. You're right. You wouldn't want to go why. Well, you could. If you could help me understand you could preface it by that. I'm just curious. I'm wondering would be verbal, what I call verbal softeners. So you could say, why is the electricity out? A fuse blew of an overload. I'm curious. Do you have any idea what caused the overload? Right? So you could still add that to it. Or, the sub pump was drawing more electricity than usual. I'm wondering, was the what caused the sub pump to draw more electricity than usual? Well, something was jammed in the impeller. You could then go back to another why and say, why is something jammed in the impeller? Because the pit is full of loose material. Is it often full of loose material? So there would be a way to be able to, you could have to practice that with your own, but you'd be still asking the why. You'd still be going a little bit deeper. I love using words like I'm curious or I'm wondering, or just to sort of soften it so it doesn't come across like you're doing some sort of a technique. Does that answer your question, Laura?
Gosh, so great answer. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, good. Okay. Any other questions?
Not right now.
Okay, good. All right, we're going to move on to listening. And I don't know about you if you've ever heard in the old days, they used to say that the good salesman has the gift of the gab, and absolutely the opposite is true. A really good salesperson has the ability to really listening. And I'm going to give you an example, but marginal listening, you're more often than not, you're actually waiting for your turn to talk. So in the middle of it, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So for marginal listening, you're in the middle of a copy machine salesperson's pitch, and the prospect says, I wonder if I have room for it. The salesperson is so intent in the script, he hears something, but he continues on. And I don't know about you, but I've had people that I communicate with, and you interject with a comment or question, they just keep going. They're more interested in hearing their own self, what they have to say. So it's really the greatest gift. I learned this in coaching. It is really the greatest gift you can give anybody is to absolutely listen. And it's following good listening principles is everything. So the next one is evaluative listen. So it's the same salesperson selling the photocopier, and he hears the comment. He makes an assumption and states, no need to be concerned. We have an easy payment plan. What he heard was, I wonder if I have room in my budget. Whereas that's not what he said at all. He just said if he had room for it. So really, evaluative listening is only listening from your own perspective. You're not really hearing what the other person said. And then active listening is if you were the same scenario, he would, ask if the customer made the comment, he would stop and ask, would you please explain what you mean by that? I wonder if I have enough room for it. The prospect replies, I was just imagining where I would place the copy machine. The salesperson would then, let's take my tape measure and see if we can find a place. So he stops and he actually is active in the listening process. We tend to rely on closed probes because they're safer. When we're actually doing sales calls and questioning and probing and everything like that, a lot of the times new salespeople, not so much people who've been around a while and they get more comfortable with it. But my experience has been when I've been training new salespeople, they really stick to closed probes because they're safer. But open probes are more effective in terms of being able to find out what the person actually needs. So if you think about yourself, whenever we talk about listening, I think everybody has people in their lives that they actually don't listen to. The person will start to talk and they listen to them in the same way all the time. And it's always about what they're going to say, how they're going to respond. It's active listening takes work and it takes practice, but I can promise you it is so worth it because you'll hear nuances that you wouldn't hear before. If you're in your own mind and you're worried about what you're going to say next. You can tell when people are, maybe passionate about something, or something, it sounds like something is more important or at a higher priority. You'll get that from tone, maybe not from the words, but you'll definitely get that from tone. And if you're not listening actively, you might miss that. And I think there's huge opportunities to be the best that the best salesperson that you can be is someone who really, really listens, and not being afraid to go back and ask questions. I think it's important. So we got,
Cindy, we had 2 questions come. Oh, perfect
oh,
timing.
I just gonna say, somebody's been watching my slides. Okay, we've
Um,
got lots of time now for lots of questions.
okay, so um, since we just finished talking about listening, one came in and it said, can you give one more example on evaluative listening?
Okay, so when you're evaluative listening would be, let me see. This is when you hear a comment and you made an assumption. So let me think off the top. So you're talking to someone, and they might say something like, well, the same. Well, I'll use the exact same example, and instead of saying no need to be concerned, we have an easy payment plan, he might have answered with a completely different. He might have even come back with a question, and said, "What? No, that would be more. Sorry, I'm trying to figure something for an evaluative question. Another example. Um, that's a really good question. So the second comment would be to make an assumption. So really making an assumption at any time would be just to throw anything in. So I'm okay. So I'll give you an example. It's a personal example. So I'm talking, say, to a friend of mine, and we're talking about going out for dinner, and someone comments and says, "I think we'll have Thai food," and I'll say, just completely not even paying attention, and just go on and say, well, no, I think we should go to Jack Astor's. Or so you're not really listening, you're only half listening. And evaluative, you're not actually really understanding what the other person is saying. Is that helpful? I'm sorry, I don't know that that's the best answer.
Nope, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Um, yeah,
Food
and
is
we
always a good example.
we did have a question that came in. It says, how do you train yourself in the art of asking questions?
It's like anything else. It's any habit. Anything you do is repetition. One of the things that I used to do, I don't do it anymore, but when I first learned to go into sales, I used to be nervous like everybody else, and I used to role play with a colleague of mine, and we used to give each other really hard questions, and we would give each other really harsh answers so that we could build up the resilience that we wouldn't get knocked out of the park. So we would play with, get out of my office, and the person feeling back, and, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, did I offend you? And we go back and forth and just play with that. So the key here is planning. And if you go back to your off the dashboard, off the consultative investigative question off the dashboard, that's a great place to start because it's a template. And then you want to look at them and think, okay, would this be applicable? Most of them are applicable to any industry you go to. Maybe not at that particular time, but there's no substitute, in my opinion, for preparation. No substitute. So sit down, brainstorm all of the possible questions. You're going to get that after a while when you're in it, there'll be a few core questions that you'll ask that'll give you the results that you want. But it's like anything else that you want. You're going to learn, it becomes a habit. You need to practice. I always recommend practicing with someone else and practice the tough questions so that when they come up in real life, you're prepared for them, and have questions that come way out of left field. And it was great training, I have to admit. It was really great training because I didn't get stumped. Another thing, if someone asks you a question and you don't have the answer for it, just be honest and authentic. Don't try and pretend. Don't try to bull or whatever. Some people, they string you along because they'll know. I always say everybody has a built-in BS detector, so they would know. So the key is for you to have the practice, but also the other side when they ask you a question. So you being able to prepare for that. So I'm going to ask this question. What's the potential that what I think they're going to say back to me? Is there a question they might ask me? It's really, that's the way I've always done it, is role play. If I'm going in to do a big presentation on an RFP or something like that, there are no surprises. I know exactly what I'm going to say, and I practice it. I write it out. I always practice with a colleague, always, because they can hear things that you can't hear, and you want to come across as confident and dig down. And I use a lot of sorry, not fillers, verbal softeners. So curiosity, and it doesn't feel like you're interrogating them, because the last thing in the world you want to do is interrogate. So making sure that it sounds authentic for you and that it's coming from a place that you actually design them so that the customer can hear beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're interested in solving their problem. That to me is the biggest thing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but to me, that's always worked. It will continue to work. Just really doing your homework. There's no substitute, in my opinion, for being prepared. Did that answer the question, whoever answered it?
That actually leads in great to our next question. It said, I feel whenever I ask questions, customers feel skeptical. Please suggest.
So you can preface it by saying, ask them right up front. In order for me to understand your needs, are you comfortable with me asking you a few questions? And you've set the stage for that. And I've never had anybody say no. And if they did, well, that would be a first. But because you're there to talk to them, and if they're skeptical, you can even hear you can. This is where reading and listening and body language and all this comes in, rapport all comes in. You can tell by their expression. You could even open it up and say, I get a sense you might be a little skeptical. Let me assure you the reasons I'm asking these questions or something. Put them at ease. It's going to build trust. It's going to be able to, because that's to me is everything, is building that trust especially when you're face to face. But you can even do it over Zoom. I've done lots of Zoom calls, or not necessarily Zoom, or I think that's probably one of them, or Skype, or there's hundreds of them out there, where if they look, if you're reading their body language, you can tell if they're not comfortable. But if you preface it by asking permission and they give it to you, then all the power to them. You could even say to them, if I ask you anything that makes you uncomfortable, please feel free to decline. So just really setting it up so they know you're not. So reason I think people are skeptical is they don't want you to talk them into anything, and maybe they don't know you well enough to know that. So you're going to have to do a little bit of work up front to be able to build that trust. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was great. Thanks, Cindy.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
Couple more seconds here in case that sparked any more questions. But otherwise, I think those were very helpful.
Good. I think the one thing that, if you believe in your product or your service, like it comes through and it helps. There's some, I've had people that are selling something that they don't particularly believe in, but if you know that they're going to get the results, they know when you're telling the truth. They know when you're authentic, and it can help build that rapport. And then you can have difficult conversations once you've built that. Maybe something's gone wrong, or maybe there's a service level issue or something like that. That's when we lose customers, is when we haven't built that up front. And one of the ways to be able to do that, honestly, is questions and listening. Those are the two things that you can do. And there's a lot of other things that go with the whole 8-step process, obviously, but we're focusing on number 4 today. So I just think it's a wonderful profession. I think it's great that the CPSA, and I'm going to be coming up to that in a minute, but that the CPSA actually has a designation now. It's recognized. I remember in 2002 when I first heard about it, I couldn't wait to do the exams, and I had the experience, and I was super proud because I always thought it was such a great profession, and it often got a bad rap. And I think people that take their sales series, their sales career series, will invest in themselves. So that's leading up to, there's more online training coming on June 25th. It's the CPSA webinar, Embracing the Digital First Sales Reality. And then July 6th, the Fundamentals of Selling online course. I'll be glad when we go back into the classroom. I love when we're in the classroom. It's absolutely fantastic. And so those are there first. And then we're going to just talk a little bit about the CPSA designations. As I said, I'm super thrilled. I got my CSL at the end of 2019. And if you're going for, after you've done your I'm assuming the online will be the same when you do your 3 days in the class and you do your pre-work and your post-work, and you've got 6 months experience and you write the exam, you can get your CSA. And then you can move on, depending on your experience, to get your CSP or your CSL. And, I think, and this is me personally, that it just sets you apart, especially if you're looking for employment at any time. They have two people sitting beside each other and they look like they got equal experience, and someone's got a designation. For me, I think that often it could go in your favor. So you will receive your hours for attending today, and it's put towards your PDUs and your CPSA designation. So I'm actually at the end. I think I talked too fast or something today, because when I timed it out earlier. So I would love to answer any questions that anybody has. So we've got like 12 minutes left, and I'd be totally happy to stay and answer any questions and see what we can learn from each other.
I don't see any questions coming in right now, but on behalf of the CPSA, Cindy, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your guidance here. That was excellent. Excellent. And of course, thank you to our audience for attending. This has been recorded and all attendees will be sent a link to the recording. And of course, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to email CPSA at salessuccess@cpsa.com. Oh, we did have a question. Do you have a few moments, Cindy?
Absolutely, yes.
Someone was looking sort of for a summary of those 5 whys again.
Okay, I can go over them. So, do they want the example?
They didn't specify, but maybe just about sort of how to use that process. Oh, they did say yes, please.
Okay. Okay, so I think it's a great example because it shows you where if you did the first initial thing that and you didn't dig any deeper, you would not have solved the problem. And so the question is, why is the electricity out? And the answer was the fuse blew because of an overload. The second why is, why was there an overload? And then the answer to that is the sump pump was drawing more electricity than usual. And then the third why was the sump pump drawing more electricity than usual? And the answer is something is jammed in the impeller. And then the fourth why is something jammed in the impeller? Because the pit is full of loose material. And then why is the pit full of loose material? Because it doesn't contain a proper crock. So fixing the fuse at the first why would have done nothing to correct the real problem, which is the proper crock. So it's any of those kinds of things. And you can actually start doing, I would practice it if you're not comfortable with it, just practice it in your own life where something maybe has gone wrong. And if you could dig down and see, just to get used to being able to do it. But I love that example. I think that it really shows, because I think most people would do exactly that. They would have just fixed the fuse. Does that help, whoever answered that question?
Yes, they said thank you. And you're definitely not being a pain. We can always learn more. So thank you so much, Cindy, for today. That was great. And thank you again for everybody for attending.
My pleasure. I look forward to the next one.